So now we have arrived at the twilight of the Republic. In the middle of the 2nd century, Rome suffered a sudden economic downturn. There was inflation as well as a grain shortage. Two brothers in particular tried to help. The Gracchi is plural for Gracchus, so the Gracchus brothers, or the Gracchi or the Gracchi, I'm not exactly sure how to say it. Tiberius saw Rome's problem coming from people who lost land, and he initiated several reforms meant to boost the small farmer. He also passed a law that redistributed public land to landless Romans, since only men who owned property could fight in the army. So, although not fully supported, the law did help some. It was passed, and it did help. When Tiberius announced he was going to run for a second term in office, he was assassinated in the Forum, and many of his followers were killed as well, thus bringing in violence to politics. His brother Gaius came about a few years later and attempted to improve the economy, the infrastructure, as well as grain distribution, and he also was murdered. The brothers, apart from the reform efforts that they established, also established a new grouping of politicians. They established new political factions, the Populares and the Optimates. The Populares, or the popular supported, this is the idea of we are supporters of the best. It's where we get, sort of the idea of you are more popular than others, right? And then we have the Optimates, who are supported by the Senate. Roman generals began taking more political positions during this time, and they were more often than not populares. They were popularly supported. The first general to really use this to his advantage was Marius. He created a professional army that did not rely only on men who owned property. His men were violently loyal to him first, not to Rome. That's incredibly important. So Marius' men were violently loyal to Marius first and to Rome second, because some did not have anything to go home to, and he'd even promised to give them land at the end of their service. His successors, Marius' successors, would ultimately use this method of securing power, which would cause civil war. Lucius Sulla was Marius' second in command, and he was the first general to command the Optimates faction. After Marius retired, Sulla took great power in the Senate, and some Italian allies rose up in civil war around about the same time, and Sulla was very successful in ending this rebellion, the social war, in which over 300,000 died. The rebels won citizenship. And so the outcome in some ways is kind of a draw. So yes, Rome wins, but the rebels are citizens. The Senate became concerned about how much power Sulla was gaining. And so they asked Marius to come out of retirement in order to, take care of this particular issue. And Sulla did the unthinkable. He marched his army into Rome. And you just didn't do this, but he did. When he marched his army into Rome, he killed off his political opponents, and then he boosted the Senate's power. And in the process, he named himself dictator. He did not name himself dictator for life. Like, this was a position that one could take in an emergency situation, and that's how he justified taking this position, that this was an emergency, and so he named himself dictator. He didn't stay in the position long, and he actually resigned his post and retired to a quiet life. But the Civil War did last for another 2 years after he marched on Rome. We start to see a change in values, and again, it's not just starting with this one person. These changes have been developing for some years now. War is no longer for defense. If you remember, when the Gauls first sacked Rome in the 300s, there is this sphere of invasion. And if we expand our territory, we will create an even larger buffer zone so that others will think twice before attempting to invade us again. So war, towards the end of the Republic, is no longer for defense. Now it's for gaining plunder. It's for getting richer. It's for getting more land. It's for getting more people. We also see changes in the military because now soldiers are not following the manly virtus, right? They're not placing their country first. Their loyalty is with their general, not with Rome. This is a problem for Rome. Competition for power no longer is about seeking the community's welfare, right? So remember, again, the idea of placing the country first. This is taking a back seat for people who now just want power. They want power and prestige. The traditional value of placing the Republic above one's personal interests basically falls away. After Sulla's retirement, we see the rise of the first triumvirate, or rule by three. Pompey, an Optimate, Julius Caesar, a Popularis, and Crassus, a wealthy businessman, all came together. All three had military victories, but Julius Caesar was the most popular with the people. He was also quite full of himself. He's reported to have said after coming into Rome after a time of great victory and saying, "Vini, vidi, vici," I came, I saw, I conquered. Upon his return to Rome after a successful campaign, we see Pompey definitely not liking the popular support that Caesar has. Crassus dies in battle. Pompey, as Caesar's greatest rival, accepts the Senate's proposal of him being the sole consul. And this, of course, angers Caesar, who then goes after sole power for himself. Pompey eventually ran away to Egypt, where he was assassinated. Caesar is on his way to get to him, and he's assassinated. Pompey is assassinated on Caesar's way to get there. And when Caesar arrives in Egypt, he meets Cleopatra, Queen Cleopatra VII. After some time, they developed a romantic relationship. They had a child together, and Caesar then returned to Rome in the year 46 BCE. Once he gets there, he, much like Sulla, declared himself dictator, but he took the title of dictator without end. So this is not a temporary position that he's taking for himself because of an emergency situation. He has made himself dictator. He's made himself a tyrant. And this, of course, angers the Senate. He did not take the title of king because he said he did not want to offend anyone, but he wore royal clothing and established a priesthood to sacrifice to himself as a deity. So he's claiming not only dictatorship, but he's also claiming deification. He says, I am a god. Now, even though Caesar was very popular with the people, there were many who were not happy with the honors that he gave himself, and 60 senators conspired against him. On March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, the 60 senators surrounded and stabbed Caesar to death. Now, there's lots of things in this that are kind of sad, but one of the saddest parts of this in my mind is that they really didn't have much of a plan after that. There's no direction whatsoever. They're acting on impulse. Murder is never the best option. It's never a good option. Let's say that. It's never an option. They don't have a plan. So they have killed the one man who holds probably the greatest sway. I say probably. He holds the greatest sway in the Republic. He's very popular with the people, and they kill him, and they kill him without a plan of what to do afterwards. So with his assassination, we effectively see the end of the Republic. From here, we are going to move into talking about Rome, the Empire. And the videos I filmed for those, I actually filmed at a different time for a different class, but it is the same lecture. So I would just ask you to please don't pay attention to instructions about test dates. Look at your syllabus. check your syllabus for your test date. So, yeah. All right. This ends the Republic.